We use this thing called Bloom's taxonomy when we write exam blueprints. You don't need to become an expert on that topic, but what you need to know is the very first verb at the beginning of each sentence of the blueprint actually carries a lot of meaning.
Hey everyone, it's Quinn and I'm back here with Francois and we're reviewing the CCNA or DevNet Associate exam topics, and this video is going to be focused on Domain 1, which focuses a lot on our data elements and Git operations. So Francois, what are some of the key areas that you've kind of like would focus on in this domain? There's a lot of different things here, and I think that there's something else that you want to cover as part of that as well, right?
Yeah, so this is 1.0, and I want to touch really quickly on the weighting, the 6 sections of this exam, and they're all weighted 15 to 20%. So they're all somewhat equal. There's not a huge difference between 15 and 20%. So you're going to have to learn a little bit of everything. And we're really covering the foundational topics here that will then come back a lot in what we do in the future sections, specifically data formats and version control with Git. Quinn, which data formats should we care about for this?
All network automation APIs are going to either return data back in XML or JSON format. And those are just natural machine readable things based on tags. So understanding what those formats look like, how to create them, maybe not a large one by hand, but understanding, like with XML, understanding tags, how to open and close tags, the slash formats, the brackets, things of that nature. JSON, same thing, understanding the bracketing and the commas and when you can use single quotes and double quotes, and being able to understand what is valid JSON. So maybe you've forgotten a comma and that invalidates a list or a dictionary or something like that. So understanding those formats is really important. And then the third thing is it's a data format, but it's mostly for like a data input format. That's the YAML format. So we can, it's easier to read. It's more space delimited. We've got colons and a lot of nesting, very white space dependent, but being able to understand how to format and create data structures in YAML is also very important.
And candidly, this is not a particularly fun topic. I mean, looking at YAML and trying to figure out what's wrong with it, I don't really enjoy doing that. But in my real life, when I'm in my text editor trying to figure out why my Ansible playbook isn't working, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to lint, you're going to have to figure out those out. So expect questions on formatting and on the nitty-gritty details of that. One thing that I want to cover specifically is the words in the exam topics. Because as we discuss the data formats, it's important to understand what level of depth you should go. We use this thing called Bloom's taxonomy when we write exam blueprints. You don't need to become an expert on that topic, but what you need to know is the very first verb at the beginning of each sentence of the blueprint actually carries a lot of meaning. You're going to see in section 1, compare, describe, explain, utilize. We don't use those words just because they sound different. We use those words because they have a very different meaning. Describe means that you need to have a high level understanding. Utilize means you need to have hands-on knowledge. And as Quinn and I will go through this video series, you're going to see us call back to that and guide you on where you need to do some hands-on training, when you need to do just some reading based on those verbs. So Quinn, where do we go from here?
Well, that brings up a good point. So talking about the utilize verb, and you can see in 1.8 with utilize common version control operations with Git. Git itself is just, it can be a locally operated protocol and standard, right? You don't need to have a GitHub account or Bitbucket or whatever. You can utilize Git locally on your machine. So as you're going through and understanding these data formats and maybe creating your own XML or your own YAML or JSON, or even if you're writing your own study notes in Markdown, have yourself a dedicated folder on your laptop and do Git commits. Learn how to, add new file, create initialize Git inside of a repository, add files to it, commit, how to revert back if you make an error, how to work through those standard Git operations, because it's a common software development methodology. It's great to have all of your stuff in Git, so you get all the nice to haves from a developer standpoint of being able to track diffs and what changed between commits. But it's also just a good way of like versioning things yourself. Like you don't have to worry about oh, renaming this to final 0.1, really final dot, markdown or whatever. They can use the same file name and just have Git do that. So probably my biggest exam tip here is just utilize a Git repository, even if it's locally on your machine and you never upload anything to the cloud.
Yeah, we're very clear with that word utilize. Hands-on experience with Git is not optional. But I'm going to give you something contrasting with that. When we talk about compare software development methods, describe the context of the concepts of test-driven development, those are not necessarily things you need to get hands-on on. Those are things you can read about because you're going to be asked high-level theoretical questions on those. So you can assign your time more efficiently if you really spend the hands-on on Git, if you get very comfortable with the data formats, and if you just read about the other stuff and understand them enough to answer questions.
If you do have questions about those, probably the last thing that you can do is join the Cisco Learning Network. There are study groups. There are questions and kind of a forum style question board where you can ask about the CCNA automation or any questions kind of related tangentially to that as well. It's a great resource for help for some of those things where you may not have the direct resources about, the test-driven development, software development methodologies, like asking questions or clarifying questions from people who have been in the field who have done that. So it's another great way to get that involvement.
Please, don't think you're alone. I mean, you're probably sitting there and watching us on video right now, but you're not alone in your studies. There is a community out there. So reach out to the community, reach out to us. We're here to help, and we'll see you in the next episode.